We all make loads of money mistakes, and it's really no one's fault. The truth is, we're not really taught how to figure this stuff out in school, at home, at work. No one actually sits down and teaches you how to not make some of these mistakes. So, in today's video, I want to highlight some of the money mistakes that are most common and some of the solutions that I think are the most effective. I'm Val Jorogen. I'm the CEO and co-founder of Africa's Pocket, and we are your one-stop shop to learn about, plan for, and act on your finances. Today's video isn't supposed to make you feel dumb or stupid or, left behind because you don't know some of these things. Actually, it's the opposite. I want to help you identify some of these mistakes that we normally make so that you have the opportunity to identify them and then course correct as quickly as possible. And just to say that this is not a comprehensive overview of all of the money mistakes you could be making or all of the things that you could be doing to improve your finances. These are just 3 opportunities that I've found are very, very transformative when it comes to improving your relationship with your finances and having a better financial system kind of helping you through. So let's get right into it. The first mistake that people tend to make is that they save only what's left over after spending. Now, this is a song that I sing over and over and over, first save and then spend what's left over. But let me give you an example of why this is so difficult to actually implement. I went back to actually the very first time that I made, significant money, my first paycheck. And I remember the first thing I did was go ahead and pay rent because I didn't want to ask my parents for money that month. I was doing an internship at the time. And I wanted them to be proud of me, to be proud of the fact that I was able to kind of, hold my own. In hindsight, I should have just taken that free rent money, but it is what it is. And then once I did that, I went ahead and had a really nice meal. I was treating myself. And then I went shopping. I bought some clothes, I bought some nice stuff for my house, some really cute things. And it gave me happiness for a while. But when I think back to that very first paycheck, there's nothing from it that I was able to say still belongs to me. That's still in my life, that's still improving my life. Now, this continued for a couple of months, a couple of years actually, really. And generally speaking, what would happen is you kind of go through this routine, you pay your expenses that are sort of expected of you, you enjoy a bit, and then whatever is left over, you kind of leave it over, and sometimes you'll buy some shares, sometimes you'll make an investment here or there, but your budget is very much driven by the stuff you have to pay. But if you think about it from the flip side, so now when I think about my life, there's a percentage of money that's always taken out of my account, whether that's from a salary or a big deal that I do or a consulting project and freelance work. A percentage of that income always goes towards my goals. And the reason why I'm able to kind of figure out what percentage it is because I have very clear goals now. And this is part of what we do in our flagship program, Your Roadmap to Wealth. We help you figure out what are those goals, starting with an emergency fund all the way to, living the vida loca on a yacht every day if that's what you want. And we really try to make it very clear what those goals could be for you, what they could look like, how much you need to put away so that you're kind of making this the first line item in your budget. And it starts to take priority over these other expenses. And so it's much easier to implement that idea of save before you spend. And when I say save, it's just really like take home money and put it away for your future you, stuff that will make future you happy, whether that's investments or holidays or buying a new, something that will make you happy, whatever it is. Make sure that it happens before you start paying expenses, which typically are making someone else's pocket bigger. When you pay rent, you're making your landlord's pocket bigger. When you go to a restaurant and enjoy a fancy meal, you're making the restaurant owner's pocket bigger, not yours. And of course, take this within your own lifestyle that you want to build and things like that. But ideally, the principle here is when you do get your income, let the first thing not be to pay everyone else and then think about yourself last. It's really to make sure that you're kind of prioritizing yourself, future you, and the goals that you have for yourself. The second big mistake we make is thinking about our financial plans in 1 month or 1 year sprints. And this is totally natural because this is how we earn money, right? Like you quote your salary on a monthly perspective or on an annual perspective. That's, nothing new. That's kind of how it's been ever since I can remember. And so it's very easy to then make plans in the same way. You kind of hear people saying, okay, these are my goals for the month, or these are my goals for the quarter, or these are my goals for the year. But what if we thought beyond that? And from this perspective, you can think about it in two ways. One is when you're saving up for expenses that are coming up or things that you want to buy. And second, or experiences that you want to kind of participate in. And then second is in how we make investments. So let's start with the first one, which is savings. And for this, the example that comes to mind is, again, when I was, in my first job or my second job, I knew that I wanted to come back to home, to Kenya. And so I knew that one of the things I would need when I went back home was a car. And I knew that a car would cost me about 500,000. But I only really started thinking about this seriously from a financial perspective when I bought my ticket, which means that I had, 2 or 3 months to figure out how to come up with 500,000, which is like $5,000. And so when you do that math, it's not feasible to kind of come up with that amount of money so quickly. And so this goal became completely unattainable to me. It was just not even possible for me to think about having a goal like that. And so it just, created this stress that I didn't need to have around, buying a car, because if I had thought about it, actually I had thought about it before, but if I had started saving for it much earlier, say when I started working, then I would have had, 20, 24 months, 26 months to put that money together. And so I'd only have been needing to put away $20K or $200 to be able to come up with that lump sum that I needed to buy a car. Now, this is not to say that, 20K is little money or 500K is too much money or anything. The numbers are just there to kind of bring it and make it practical to you. But the principle here is really that there are some things in your life that are going to happen. So for example, if you'd like to get married, you're going to have to pay for a wedding. Or if you'd like to have children, they're going to have to go to daycare and to kindergarten and to university. Or if you have grandchildren, you want to spoil them once in a while, you want to, buy stuff for their birthdays and things like that. All these things are things that are going to happen. Sometimes you even know them, 10 years in advance, like if you take the example of kids into account. Yet we only start to prepare ourselves financially for them in a very short, period of time. What I want to urge you to do is that with these things that are going to happen, you want to upgrade your car one day, you want to go on holiday at the end of the year, you want your kids to go to a certain type of school, then start thinking about those plans in advance so that you're able to get away with putting away a small amount of money today for a long period of time, and then you have that lump sum in the future, and it's a much better financial experience than kind of rushing, a year, 3 months before. So that's my challenge to you, is think about your expenses, your large expenses that are gonna come, or even the ones that you're not sure about it, but start putting that money aside for those kinds of things. And then second is how you think about investments. So with investments, we do tend to think more long term. So I'm thinking about my very first investments that I made. I would be thinking, I'm gonna be able to, buy this asset and be able to offload it or sell it or exit in 3 years or 5 years, even sometimes it would be like 7 years, and I'm like, wow, that's long. But really, with investments, if we're saying we want to create generational wealth, then we should really be investing in assets that can survive us, assets that are going to last longer than our lives, so that we can pass them down to the next generation. And so lately, one of the things I started asking myself is this asset capable of surviving me? Is it possible for me or is it going to help me get an asset that's capable of surviving me? And then if the answer is yes, then am I okay if the next generation, my children or my grandchildren, acquire this or inherit this from me? Is it going to bring them stress, or is it going to bring them joy and happiness and wealth? And this has become a really good yardstick to assess an investment. And if I had been asking myself these questions 5, 6, 7 years ago, there's a lot of investments I wouldn't have made as a result of asking myself that question. Now granted, not every investment is going to become a generational wealth asset, but it should still help you get there. There's some smart ways to do investment structuring so that you're able to kind of do some leaps. But it doesn't mean that your entire portfolio should look like that. You really should be working towards building those assets that are going to be here for hundreds of years, which is quite a mind-blowing way to think about something. The third mistake that we make is not having the systems that we need to really manage our money. And this usually stems from not really understanding how your money flows. I completely resonate with this because my money personality is a spender. People hear that and they laugh. They're like, how can you teach about money? How can you be a personal finance person and you're a spender? And I'm like, being a spender is not something I chose. It's really just a personality. It's your predisposition. It's the way your brain interprets money. And so for me, when I get cash or money, I really just want to be able to spend it on myself and people that I love, to just kind of enjoy. And so, as you can imagine, like, my very worst personal finance activity is actually tracking my spending. I don't like it. I always come up with that. There's always like, oh my gosh, how was that? You who spent that? How could you spend that much on category X? That could have gotten you to blah blah blah, and then insert goal here type of thing. So I always have a lot of regrets when I go and look at my transactions, and so I don't like to do that activity. So because of that, one of the things that I did was to create a system that allows me to kind of spend the way I want without really jeopardizing my financial goals or future value. And so the way that I do this is that I mentioned, whenever any money hits my account, a percentage of it is taken out and it's taken to a savings account, and that's usually reserved for investing. Which means that the account from which I transact, where I have my cards, I'm not able to spend more than I should. And that action of the money kind of moving is almost immediate, and that's something that I've been able to work out with my bank. And so what this allows me to do is just have that peace of mind of, even if I overspend on certain categories, it's not really stopping me from achieving my financial goals. Those are already kind of taken care of, and they're separate, and they're not part of what I'm able to swipe or M-Pesa or whatever. So that's one side of it. And then the second side of it is with expenses, because when you're a spender like me, even if you're not, actually, one of the big risks that you face is actually running out of cash before your next pool of in or your next check comes in. And so what I do here is I have sort of rules that I follow when it comes to budgeting and or spending. So let me give an example. This usually works really well with variable costs because those are the ones that you're spending throughout the month. The ones that are fixed, usually you will have already taken them out of your account at the beginning of the month. So things like rent, utilities, Wi-Fi, you get a bill and you have to pay them. But when it comes to things like fuel, airtime, eating out, then it's really easy to kind of go overboard with your transactions if you're not careful. So I have these rules. Like, for example, I'll say I know that I usually fuel twice a month, and each time I fuel, I'm going to fuel this amount. So then I have a sort of rough budget, and I know if I'm getting to fuel time number 3, we're kind of going overboard, and I need to kind of watch and see where that money is going to come from. Same with eating out. I would say something like I'm going to eat out once a week, and my budget whenever I eat out is X amount. So this is a form of envelope budgeting. I'm not as strict. I don't walk around with envelopes. That hasn't worked for me. But this works because I have this mental counter in my mind that's kind of like, okay, I know that I can, okay, maybe last time when I went to eat out, I actually didn't spend, $20. Instead, I spent 10, and so I can kind of afford a coffee as well. That's another way to think of. That's another way to kind of manage and to create a system that helps you kind of stay on track. And I know, generally speaking, when we say system, people think about tech and, like alerts and reminders and somebody telling you you're over budget. Then that's something that I personally don't enjoy that much. Actually, at Africa's Pocket, we're trying to build something that's super easy to use, that gives you a really good overview of your finances, like a dashboard. And that's a shameless plug right there. But my point is, we don't want it to become, this thing that makes you feel bad about the way you're spending your money. Because if you just have a couple of rules, then you can, generally speaking, follow a system that allows you to stay on track. And so that's the third thing that I'll tell you to kind of think about is, do you have a system that allows you to understand how your money flows and keeps you on track to actually reaching those financial goals. And you've seen today that almost everything I've talked about kind of leads back to your goals. And that's really what we try to do for you in your Roadmap to Wealth, is help you understand what these financial goals could look like, give you a framework for making them, and then help you understand how much they would be every single month. So you have a very practical and clear system that you need to follow to reach those goals in whatever timeline you've given for yourself. And so with that, I hope that you will be able to see these mistakes as they happen, kind of note them down. If you're a writer, actually write them down, put them in your phone, like figure out a way to kind of track them and make sure that you're taking action when they do happen, so that you can start to improve your financial life day by day. And so with that, let me say goodbye until next time. Sending you very good vibes from my pocket to yours.